$5 billion, 300,000 tons of steel, a bridge designed to carry 10,200 trucks a day, a project meant to unite two nations, now splitting them apart. Before the first truck even crossed the Gordie Howe Bridge, a 25% tariff from Washington shattered everything. Overnight, traffic collapsed by 33%, revenue projections tanked, and engine blocks that should have crossed the border 6 times during assembly, they're rotting in storage yards, costing automakers up to $5,000 per vehicle. Windsor's factories fell silent, Detroit's foundries shut down, farmers lost their markets, truckers lost their routes, and now Ottawa is staring at a 48-year payback period on a project that was supposed to finance itself in 30. What happened? Was this a trade war or something more calculated? Who stood to gain when an international bridge began to fail? Let's go inside and uncover how one sentence from Washington triggered a chain reaction of economic chaos, political betrayal, and cross-border collapse. It began with a vision. No, a dream. A shining steel arc called the Gordie Howe International Bridge, stretching with unbreakable resolve across the Detroit River. 6 lanes wide, 1.5 miles long, a monument to progress, an artery carved into the modern heart of North America. Nearly $5 billion, bankrolled almost entirely by Canada, was poured into this titan of infrastructure. It wasn't just concrete and cables. It was commitment, belief, legacy. This bridge was designed not only to relieve the battered Ambassador Bridge, narrow, tired, and overworked since 1929, but to reshape how nations connect, to transform how goods, workers, and economies flowed between Windsor and Detroit. It would be the new spinal cord of the Great Lakes Economic Corridor. But did Canada truly grasp what it was building? Did anyone realize that this wouldn't be just a bridge of steel, but one of risk, of politics, of trust? That diplomacy would be the real foundation, not rebar? From the start, it was marketed as a gift. But as political tides turned, that gift began to resemble a Trojan horse. Then came the tremor, the first crack in the concrete vision. Spring 2025. Washington blindsides its neighbors. The Trump administration invokes Section 232 of the 1974 Trade Expansion Act to impose a 25% tariff on cars manufactured in Canada and Mexico. The justification? National security. National security from Canada? The headlines screamed. The financial markets shuddered. Assembly lines froze. For a country whose economic lifeline pulses through cross-border trade, the blow was immediate and deep. What was this? A calculated economic policy or political theater, a bold move or a warning shot? Within 72 hours, the consequences became terrifyingly clear. Windsor's factory floors dimmed, production halted. Thousands of workers stared at blank walls and silent machines. On the Detroit side, small foundries and contract shops began canceling shifts. Supply chains didn't just slow, they snapped. 1 engine block, 6 border crossings. That's how intricate the North American auto industry has become. Now, every crossing incurred a tariff, and the cost per vehicle surged by up to $5,000. That wasn't just an inconvenience, that was an existential threat. Could your family still afford to lease that car? Could dealerships survive? Could assembly plants keep their doors open another quarter? Truckers, caught in the storm, turned idle engines into picket lines, not to deliver, but to protest. Their loads, stacked in trailers, were frozen in bureaucratic limbo. Food spoiled, parts expired, appointments were missed, contracts were voided. And what was the point of a $5 billion engineering marvel if it only led to chaos? In Windsor, union halls surged with frustrated workers. Lana Payne, Unifor president, shouted through a bullhorn, "The idea that we are a national security threat is a..." The crowd roared, but it was a roar. Across the river, in a Detroit Teamsters hall, Ben Hollis faced the media. Every tariffed load means food gone from a trucker's table. These are not statistics. These are families. The crowd didn't cheer. They stared, silent, solemn. Was this a or warfare? And who was counting the casualties? At the same time, another crisis emerged. Quieter, colder, financial. The Gordie Howe Bridge was designed to be self-sufficient. No tax burden, Ottawa promised. A toll-based model, projected on 10,200 vehicles per day. Enough to repay the bonds, generate surplus, build confidence. But the reality was harsher. Just 6,740 vehicles crossed, a 33% plunge in revenue. Suddenly, bondholders grew restless. Pension fund managers in Toronto and New York started asking hard questions. The amortization schedule began to look less like a plan and more like a prayer. Was this bridge now sinking under its own weight? And the toll wasn't just fiscal, it was agricultural. Greenhouse crops in Ontario sat in limbo. Trucks of Michigan soybeans rerouted, delayed, or returned. Ottawa retaliated with surgical precision, targeting bourbon, citrus, and dairy. But what was the price of revenge? Farmers were crushed, markets convulsed, community fairs were canceled, food banks went dry. And in the midst of it all, a quiet victor emerged. The Ambassador Bridge, privately owned, long maligned, suddenly resilient. Despite its age and disrepair, it thrived as traffic trickled back to familiar lanes. Rumors erupted. Had its owners lobbied for these tariffs? Had they whispered national security into Washington's ears to save their legacy? If so, this wasn't a tariff. It was sabotage in a suit. Canada reacted, scrambling for lifelines. A rail-on-road adaptation was proposed. High-tech sensors, fiber-embedded rails, dual-mode freight. But the cost? $450 million? Politically impossible. Then came Plan B, a new customs terminal. Faster, smarter, biometric. But the time savings? Mere minutes. Why does government always reach for the most expensive solution, while ignoring the simplest truth? This wasn't a logistics crisis. It was a trust collapse. Global powers began to murmur. G7 partners raised alarm bells. Tokyo, Berlin, London, all warned that a protectionist North America could rupture global trade arteries. Washington flinched, briefly. A proposal floated, reduce tariffs to 15%. But in the heat of an election year, no one wanted to look weak. The Gordie Howe Bridge wasn't just a trade route anymore. It was a bargaining chip, a photo op, a propaganda prop. Still, Canada pressed on. September 17, 2025, the bridge opened. A heavy fog rolled across the Detroit River, cloaking the bridge's towers in ghostly white. Dignitaries assembled beneath flags that barely stirred. The first truck crossed. The cameras clicked. A customs officer smiled. But behind that smile lay exhaustion, fear, and an unspoken question. Was this the end of the dream or the beginning of something worse? Traffic remained tepid. Truckers hesitated. Companies hadn't migrated to the new toll system. Old habits and lower fees kept many tied to the ambassador. Gordie Howe's promise of AI-based pre-clearance? Impressive, 35% faster, but it wasn't enough. The bleeding continued. Amortization projections stretched from 30 to 48 years. Ratings agencies signaled concern. Ottawa braced for impact. And then came the ripple effect on real lives. Jill's Diner in Windsor lost 30% of lunch business. Karaoke night at Greektown's Foxhole Pub went silent. Truckers stopped crossing the border. One bartender said, "They used to sing Springsteen. Now it's just silence." The Ministry of Public Works drafted Plan C, slashed tolls for 10 years, absorbed the cost with taxpayer funds. Some cheered. Others called it a sellout. The headlines grew darker, and in that darkness, diplomacy flickered. Backdoor negotiations, retaliatory tariff rollbacks, trade officials whispering behind closed doors. But was it too late? Montreal's Serrano Institute warned, if this rift continued, U.S. manufacturing exports would fall 1.2%, Canada's by 2.4% by 2030. Industries beyond automotive, chemicals, aerospace, software were already feeling tremors. So here we stand, at the edge of a $5 billion bridge, built on trust, now creaking under suspicion. Can a bridge meant to unite now divide? Will it carry goods or ghosts of a better era? Can we still repair what politics broke? Or is this the price of forgetting that steel alone does not hold nations together? Trust does? The Gordie Howe Bridge towers remain, tall, proud, silent. But what flows across them now is not just commerce, it's consequence. And the real burden isn't traffic, it's truth.